Hello there. My name is Armando and I am fascinated by human behavior. In my experience, one of the most persistent myths around personal change is the idea that motivation should come first. Indeed, we tend to wait for the feeling of readiness somehow, that surge of energy, the sense of, today I feel like doing it. But motivation is an extremely unstable state. In my personal experience, and I'm sure others will relate to that, motivation tends to fluctuate constantly. It is affected by sleep, stress, mood, hormones, the weather, mental load, even completely unrelated events. So, treating motivation as a prerequisite for action tends to create a very fragile system because the behavior becomes dependent on a feeling that is inherently unreliable. This is something I've observed very clearly in my own life. As a matter of fact, there are many days when I do not feel particularly motivated to exercise, for example. There is no excitement, no special drive, no dramatic enthusiasm or energy. But if I waited for motivation, many workouts simply wouldn't have happened across my life. But something very interesting occurs when action is not negotiated with mood, when the decision is already made, so that your mind and your body are already aware and okay that this is how it is. This is when the behavior exists as part of the normal structure of your day, for example, as part of your routine, rather than a reaction to a feeling, in this case, motivation. Very often, motivation follows movement, actually, and not the other way around. So, starting is usually the hardest part, definitely, but once the body is engaged, once momentum exists, resistance almost always weakens. The energy shifts, the mood tends to shift with it, the endorphins kick in, and what felt heavy becomes neutral, sometimes even enjoyable. This is deeply counterintuitive for many people. We tend to assume that we must first feel like doing something in order to do it. But in practice, what I've experienced is that behavior often generates the very state that we are waiting for. This in turn suggests a different strategy. So instead of asking, how do I stay motivated? Perhaps trying, how do I reduce the need for motivation altogether? By lowering activation thresholds, by making the start easier, by removing the internal debate so there's no room for negotiation even. And small tricks work surprisingly well in my experience. So, for example, committing to a shorter version of your usual workout when you're feeling low energy, even if just to trick your mind into exercising at all. So, allowing imperfection to happen, beginning without evaluating how you feel. Because motivation is not a dependable fuel source, believe me, but momentum can be cultivated. And momentum is far more stable and far more reliable. It grows from repetition, not from emotion. And the paradox is that disciplined individuals are not necessarily more motivated. They are usually often less dependent on motivation itself. So they act within systems, routines, and even within identities that make behavior less negotiable. And that's a lot less dramatic and less exhausting than the other way. So change becomes lighter when it is not framed as a daily battle of feelings, when action is decoupled from emotional weather, when behavior becomes something closer to a rhythm than a decision. Perhaps consistency is not about maintaining high motivation, but about building structures that survive low motivation times. Something to consider, and as always, very interested in how that resonates with you.